If you think you've ever felt truly alone in your own home, wait until you hear what started scratching under my floorboards. I never believed silence could feel heavy, but in my apartment it always did. It wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet, the sort that wraps around you like a blanket. Mine felt like someone standing just behind me, breathing softly, waiting for me to turn around. Every night, when I closed the door behind me after work, I felt it settle onto my shoulders, pressing down with an invisible weight. Maybe it was the loneliness, or maybe it was the way the walls seemed too thin for a place that should have felt like home. I didn't always live alone. There had been people, friends, co-workers, voices, but somewhere along the way, everything emptied out. A breakup that drained me, a job that demanded more than it gave, a few too many nights when I ignored my phone buzzing because I didn't have the energy to pretend I was okay. Eventually, the calls stopped. People moved on, and I stayed here, in this apartment that never quite felt like mine. I tried to keep routines. Wake up, shower, get to work, pretend to be functioning, get home, heat up something processed, and scroll on my phone until my brain shut down. But the cracks were starting to show. I caught myself forgetting simple things, turning off the kettle, locking the door, remembering whether I had actually eaten dinner or just thought about it. Sometimes I'd wake up at night convinced someone had been in the room with me, only to find everything exactly as I left it. Almost exactly as I left it. The first time something felt truly wrong was when I found the kitchen chair pulled out. Not just slightly, but fully, as if someone had been sitting there, facing the hallway. I brushed it off as me being distracted. I probably left it like that. Or at least, that's what I told myself. But a thin, sour feeling crept into my chest. What if I hadn't? The apartment building was old, the kind where you could hear footsteps from the floor above, pipes rattling like bones inside the walls, the wind slipping through unseen cracks. But lately, the sounds had changed. They weren't the usual creaks or groans of the structure settling. They were softer, more intentional. A quiet tap 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 on the wall behind my bed that stopped the moment I lifted my head. A slow, dragging sound in the hallway at night, as though someone was walking without lifting their feet. I tried telling myself it was all in my head, just stress and exhaustion combining into something that felt like fear. But the feeling that I wasn't alone never left. It followed me from room to room like a shadow I couldn't shake off. I'd be brushing my teeth and suddenly feel a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, as if someone was staring at me. Or I'd open the bathroom door and swear the air felt disturbed, like someone had just slipped out seconds before I arrived. One night, after another endless day at work, I collapsed onto my bed without bothering to turn on the lights. The darkness felt comforting, almost gentle. I closed my eyes and tried not to think about the chair, or the hallway noises, or the creeping dread that had become my nightly companion. But as I drifted toward sleep, I felt something strange. A slight indentation on the mattress beside me, subtle but unmistakable, as if someone had sat down right next to where I lay. My eyes snapped open. The room was pitch black. I didn't move, barely breathed. The indentation slowly deepened, inch by inch, like weight settling into place. I didn't hear anything. No footsteps, no breathing, no whisper. Just the bed shifting under a pressure that wasn't mine. And then, as if to confirm that I wasn't imagining any of it, the faint scent of something unfamiliar drifted toward me. Not perfume. Not detergent. Something damp, metallic, almost like soil after rain. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, frozen, listening to the darkness breathe. The next morning felt unreal, like I had walked through a dream and somehow brought its weight back with me. My body ached from lying stiff for hours, my eyes burned, and the apartment looked the same as always, ordinary, quiet, harmless. Yet as I stood in the doorway of my bedroom, staring at the rumpled bedsheets, I couldn't shake the certainty that something had been there. Something that didn't belong to the world I trusted. I tried to convince myself it was sleep paralysis or a half-dream, some trick of an exhausted mind. But when I touched the mattress where the indentation had been hours earlier, the fabric felt oddly cool, as if it hadn't fully warmed up again overnight. As if whatever had been sitting there didn't give off heat at all. Work was no escape. I sat at my desk staring at spreadsheets without absorbing anything, my thoughts drifting back to the apartment. My coworker asked if I was sick. I mumbled something about insomnia. She nodded sympathetically, but her eyes lingered on me a moment too long, as if she sensed there was more to the story. I didn't tell her. What would I even say? That something invisible shared my bed. That I could smell the earth on its breath. By the time I got home, the sun was already sinking, throwing long shadows across the living room floor. I hesitated before turning the key. My own hesitation startled me. I had lived here for years, yet for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to walk through my own front door. Still, I forced myself inside. The familiar heaviness of the air greeted me instantly. I tossed my bag onto the couch and froze. The kitchen chair, again, was pulled out. Exactly like before. Same angle. Same distance from the table. This time I hadn't forgotten. I was sure of it. The fear that had been lurking at the edges of my thoughts struck hard, sinking cold fingers into my chest. Okay, I said aloud, though my voice sounded small and thin in the stillness. Maybe someone got in. But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't right. There were no signs of forced entry. No open windows. No missing belongings. Just disturbances too precise, too selective to be random. To calm myself, I checked every room. Bedroom, bathroom, closets, behind the shower curtain. Nothing. The place was empty. Too empty. I put the chair back, pushing it firmly under the table, almost angrily, as if the strength behind the motion could prove something. That I was in control. That I had the power to undo whatever was creeping into my life. Hours passed. I cooked dinner, but barely ate. I left the TV on for background noise, though I wasn't really watching. I paced from room to room until it was late enough that exhaustion began to overpower fear. I told myself I'd sleep on the couch, just for a night. The bedroom suddenly felt like a place I wasn't welcome. Around midnight, as I settled under a blanket, a soft thud echoed from the hallway. I sat up instantly. Not footsteps. Not pipes. Something else. A deliberate sound, like a small object falling, or being placed, on the floor. I waited, counting seconds. The air felt charged again, not heavy this time, but expectant. Like the room was holding its breath. Another sound followed, faint and repetitive. A slow, steady scraping. Coming from the bedroom. No, I whispered, my voice barely audible. But the scraping continued, dragging along the wooden floorboards in short, uneven strokes. I stood up, legs trembling, and forced myself to walk toward the sound. Every step felt like I was moving deeper into something I didn't understand. The moment I reached the bedroom doorway, the noise stopped abruptly. I flicked on the light. Empty room. Undisturbed sheets. No sign of movement. But something new caught my eye, a long, thin scratch on the floorboards near the foot of the bed. Fresh. Pale. As if something sharp had been drawn across the wood. I crouched down, inspecting the mark. It was shallow but unmistakable. When I ran my finger over it, a splinter broke free, lodging itself under my nail. I hissed at the sting. And then I noticed it. Right beside the scratch, almost invisible unless you were looking closely, was a small smear of dirt. Dark. Wet. Like soil clinging to the edge of a shovel. Or the underside of something that had climbed out of the ground. That same damp, metallic smell from the night before drifted upward. My heartbeat thudded painfully in my ears. I wasn't imagining it. Whatever was happening wasn't just in my head. Something was entering my space. My home. And it wasn't trying to hide anymore. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat on the couch with every light on, staring at the dark hallway leading to the bedroom. Each time the refrigerator clicked or the building shifted, I jolted like someone had shouted my name. The scratch on the floor, the dirt, the smell, none of it had a logical explanation that brought comfort. The thoughts circling in my mind were getting darker, crawling into places reason couldn't reach. If something was coming into my room at night, why? What did it want? And why me? At dawn, my phone buzzed. A message from my supervisor asking why I hadn't answered their last email. I realized I hadn't touched my work laptop since the previous afternoon. The world outside my apartment felt impossibly distant, like another reality I was slowly losing access to. I typed a half-coherent reply and forced myself to function. Shower. Clothes. A piece of toast I didn't finish. When I reached the door to leave, I paused with my hand on the handle. A cold sensation crawled along my spine, a warning I didn't want to acknowledge. I turned and glanced back into the apartment, expecting, hoping, to see nothing. And nothing was exactly what I saw. But it felt like something was watching from just beyond the edges of my vision. Stepping outside should have offered relief. Fresh air, brighter light, the noise of people living their ordinary lives. But instead, I felt exposed. Vulnerable. Like whatever had entered my home could follow me anywhere. On the bus, I kept checking the reflections in the window, half expecting to see someone sitting beside me even when the seat was empty. At work, I jumped whenever someone walked by my cubicle. I didn't tell anyone. It wasn't that I thought they'd laugh, it was that I didn't have the words to describe what was happening without sounding like I was losing my grip on reality. Maybe I was. Maybe all of this was stress, exhaustion, isolation molding itself into something monstrous. But then lunchtime came, and I saw something that shattered any hope of rational explanation. I reached into my bag to grab my headphones, and my fingers brushed against something cold and gritty. I pulled my hand out quickly. My palm was smeared with dark soil, clinging in damp clumps to my skin. The exact same smell hit me, wet earth, metallic, heavy. My breath caught. I reached back into the bag cautiously and felt it, a small pile of dirt sitting in the bottom like someone had scooped a handful from the ground and dropped it there. I swallowed hard. This wasn't my apartment. This wasn't night. I was in an office full of people, yet somehow the same presence had left a message, a mark, a warning. I hurried to the bathroom, washed my hands until they were red, leaning over the sink with my heart pounding. When I got back to my desk, the dirt was gone. Completely. My bag was clean. The lining dry. Not even a grain left. I stared into the empty space, colder than before. Had I imagined it? Or had something removed the evidence deliberately? I left work early. I lied about feeling sick, which wasn't entirely untrue. My body felt wrong, lightheaded, unsteady, as if my own weight didn't belong to me. On the way home, I considered texting someone, anyone, but who would I reach out to? I had let everyone drift away months ago. Loneliness was the perfect environment for something like this to grow. The thought made my skin crawl. When I arrived at my building, I stood outside for several minutes. I stared up at my apartment window, half expecting to see someone peering out. It was empty. Still, I took the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. Inside, the air felt thicker than before, as if it had grown denser in my absence. I walked down the hall toward the bedroom, bracing myself for something, anything. The door was half open. I pushed it gently. The scratch on the floor was still there. But next to it, a new one had appeared. Longer, deeper, curving slightly like a mark made by fingers dragged across wood. And more dirt. A thin trail, like footprints without shape. I whispered, "What do you want?" even though the room was empty. Silence answered. But the silence was listening. I stood there staring at the new scratch. feeling the weight of the silence settle around me like a thick, suffocating blanket. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was anticipation. The room felt almost alive, as if it was holding something inside its walls, a tension waiting to snap. I backed away slowly, refusing to take my eyes off the floor, off the marks that hadn't been there that morning. Every instinct screamed at me to get out, but a darker part of me needed to understand what was happening. I realized something else then. The scratches were moving. Not literally shifting, but their placement told a story. Last night's mark had been near the foot of the bed. Today's reached closer toward the center of the room, toward the place where I slept. It felt deliberate, like a slow approach. Something inching its way toward me night by night. I stepped into the living room, heart pounding so hard it felt like my chest might crack. I tried to call someone, anyone, but my contact list felt foreign, filled with names I hadn't spoken to in months. I thought about calling emergency services, but what would I say? There's dirt and scratches on my floor. They would think I was hallucinating. Maybe I was. But the cold pressure behind my sternum said otherwise. By early evening, I couldn't take the stillness anymore. I needed to be somewhere else, somewhere with noise and people. I grabbed my coat and left the apartment, slamming the door behind me like it could shut out whatever had seeped into my life. The air outside was cool and sharp, grounding me for the first time in days. I walked without direction, letting the city's noise drown out my thoughts. People brushed past me, conversations buzzed, cars honked, normal life everywhere, and I felt painfully removed from it. I must have walked for an hour before my legs forced me to sit on a bench near the river. The water moved steadily, uncaring, carrying on without hesitation. I envied it. As I watched the rippling surface, I spoke softly, hoping the words would anchor me to something real. I'm not losing my mind, I said. Something is happening. Something is really happening. But saying it didn't bring comfort. It only made the truth sink deeper. I stayed outside until the sky went black and the streetlights flickered on. A part of me wanted to stay out all night. But another part knew I couldn't avoid the apartment forever. Whatever this presence was, it had already followed me to work. It wouldn't stop just because I ran from it. My building looked different in the dark. Taller. Emptier. The windows were like hollow eyes staring down, waiting for me to return. I climbed the stairs slowly, dread filling me with each step. When I reached my door, I hesitated again. I almost turned around. But I couldn't live like that, trapped outside my own life. I forced the key into the lock. The moment the door opened, I knew something was wrong. Not because anything looked different. But because the air was warmer. Damp. Like someone had just been breathing heavily in the room. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, trying to steady my nerves. Every sound felt amplified, the hum of the fridge, the creak of the floorboards, the faint buzz of a streetlight outside. I walked toward the bedroom cautiously. The door was now completely open, not halfway like before. I swallowed hard. This felt like an invitation. Or a warning. The lights flickered as I stepped inside. The 2 scratches on the floor looked darker now, almost black in the dim glow. I knelt down again, studying them, and for the first time I noticed something new. Embedded in the deeper scratch was a tiny fragment of something. Not dirt. Not wood. Something pale. I leaned closer. It wasn't until my fingers brushed it that I realized what it was. Bone. A sliver of bone no bigger than a fingernail. I recoiled instantly, wiping my fingers on my jeans. My pulse thundered in my ears. A bone fragment. In my bedroom floor. Something was clawing its way toward me, literally. Digging itself closer. Tearing itself apart in the process. My breath came in short, shallow bursts as I whispered into the room, "What are you?" For the first time, there was an answer. Not words. Not a sound. A shift in the air behind me. A faint, cold exhale brushing the back of my neck. I froze. And then, from just inches away, a soft, deliberate scrape across the floor. I didn't turn around at first. I couldn't. Every muscle in my body locked, my breath caught halfway in my throat. The scrape behind me was soft, too soft for anything large, but deliberate in a way that made my skin crawl. I felt the hairs on my arms rise, my instinct screaming that whatever stood behind me wasn't meant to exist where light could touch it. Finally, with a slow, trembling movement, I turned my head. The room was empty. No figure, no shadow, nothing out of place except the scratches and that impossible sliver of bone. But the scrape, that quiet, crawling sound, still echoed in my ears like a memory that hadn't finished happening. I forced myself to stand. My legs shook as I backed out of the bedroom, keeping my eyes fixed on the floor as if something might dart out from under the bed. When I reached the living room, I grabbed my keys, my phone, my coat, anything I could get my hands on. I didn't know where I was going, only that I couldn't stay. Not tonight. Not after that. But the moment I reached for the door, I stopped. My hand hovered over the doorknob. It wasn't locked. I knew I had locked it when I came home. I always did. The bolt was still in place, but the knob was turned slightly, just a fraction, like someone on the other side had tested it. Or worse, like someone inside had opened it while I was in the bedroom. My breath stuttered in my chest. The urge to flee battled with the raw, gnawing terror that maybe the hallway wasn't safer than what waited inside. I put my ear to the door, listening. Nothing. Not even the distant hum of neighbors' TVs. An unnatural stillness clung to the entire building. I backed away from the door and sank onto the couch, gripping my phone like a lifeline. I should call someone. I knew I should. But my hands were shaking so badly the phone nearly slipped from my fingers. I dialed a number without thinking, the first one that came to mind, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. It rang once. Twice. 3 times. Then her voice. Soft, confused. Hello. I didn't even know what to say. The words tangled in my throat. Something's happening, I managed. In my apartment. I don't feel safe. She was silent for a moment, then sighed with a mix of concern and hesitation. What do you mean? Did someone break in? I don't know, I whispered. But something's in here. Something, not right. I expected her to think I was losing it. And maybe I was. But instead she said, voice low and surprisingly steady, I can come over if you want. For a second, relief washed through me so strongly I thought I might cry. But then another sound drifted from the bedroom. Not scraping this time. Not footsteps. Something softer. Breathing. Slow. Wet. As though lungs filled with damp earth were trying to pull in air that didn't belong to them. I clamped a hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. My friend's voice came through the phone, distant now. Hello. Are you still there? Yes, I hissed. Don't come. Please. Don't. What? Why not? There's something here with me. I struggled to whisper without letting the fear crack my voice. I don't want it to see you too. Another breath from the bedroom. Closer this time. Too close. My friend didn't respond right away. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, more serious, more grounded. I'm calling for help. Stay where you are. Stay on the line. No. I nearly shouted, panic shooting through me. If someone came, if they walked into this thing, they wouldn't walk out again. I didn't know how I knew that, but certainty wrapped cold fingers around my spine. Something's trying to get closer, I whispered. Every night, it gets closer. It's digging toward me. The line crackled slightly. Digging, she repeated, disbelief soft but not mocking. What do you mean? I tried to explain about the scratches, the dirt, the bone fragment, the breathing. But as I spoke, something shifted in the hallway. A gentle thump, like a hand, or something shaped like one, pressing against the wall. I stood, my legs barely holding me, phone still pressed to my ear. Something's moving, I whispered. What's moving? Before I could answer, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the apartment plunged into darkness. The last thing I heard before my phone cut out was the unmistakable sound of something pulling itself across the floor toward me. Not walking. Dragging. When the lights went out, the darkness hit me like a physical force. Thick, suffocating, absolute. My phone screen flickered for a moment, casting a pale, shaking glow across the room before the battery died entirely with a soft, hopeless click. I was alone in the blackness, with only the sound, God, that sound, of something dragging itself closer across my floor. I forced myself not to move. Any panic-driven motion felt like it would draw attention, like prey disturbing dry leaves. My breathing grew shallow, barely more than a tremble in my throat. I strained to listen, my senses sharpening in the absence of light. The dragging was slow, deliberate, as if whatever was approaching wanted me to hear every inch of its progress. The noise paused for a heartbeat, then resumed, closer to the living room now. The wooden floor creaked under a shifting weight. I tried to swallow, but my throat was too dry. In the darkness, my imagination filled in details my eyes couldn't provide, something crawling on joints that weren't meant to bend, something covered in soil and bone fragments, something whose very presence carried the smell of damp graves. My instinct screamed at me to run to the door, to flee into the hallway, but what if it was between me and the exit? The silence stretched, broken only by a faint brushing sound, like fingers, or something like fingers, trailing along the wall. The darkness seemed to ripple with movement. I backed up slowly until my heel touched the edge of the couch. I sank into it, pulling my knees up to my chest, trying to make myself smaller. Invisible. But the creature, if it was a creature, didn't seem fooled by stillness. The dragging shifted direction, angling toward me. Then, suddenly, it stopped. Everything went silent. For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe it had retreated. Maybe I had imagined the whole thing. But then the smell hit me, stronger than ever. Wet earth. Rot. A faint metallic tang that clung to the back of my tongue. It was right in front of me. I couldn't see it, but I felt its presence pressing into the air between us. A soft exhale brushed against my shin. Cold. Wrong. As if the air passing from it had never touched lungs that lived. I bit down on a scream so hard that my jaw ached. My hands trembled violently, nails digging into my palms. I felt something shift just inches away, the faintest whisper of movement. And then, something touched me. Fingers, not human fingers, too long, too cold, too uneven, brushed along my ankle. My whole body convulsed. I kicked instinctively, my heel connecting with something solid but strangely soft beneath the surface. A sharp gasp escaped me. The creature recoiled with a low, wet sound, more vibration than noise, the kind of sound that vibrated inside my bones instead of my ears. I scrambled backward, my palms slipping against the couch fabric. The creature dragged itself again, closer, as if my resistance had only fueled its hunger. Desperation surged through me. I reached blindly for anything I could use as a weapon, a lamp, a book, anything, but found nothing. My fingers scraped across the coffee table, knocking something to the floor. The object clattered loudly. The dragging paused. The creature seemed to orient itself toward the sound. I held my breath. Slowly, I reached for the fallen object. My fingers closed around it. It was my metal water bottle, heavy, solid. My only chance. I tightened my grip. Then, summoning every ounce of terror-fueled strength, I swung blindly in front of me. The bottle connected with something hard. A crack, like hitting damp wood, echoed through the room. A guttural shuddering sound burst from the creature. And then everything changed. The lights flickered back on. A weak, flickering glow filled the room. My eyes adjusted slowly. The floor in front of me was smeared with dark soil. Thick trails of dirt led from the bedroom to where I sat. But the creature was gone. No body. No shape. Only a deep, fresh scratch gouged into the floor exactly where I had struck. As if the thing had dissolved, or sunk, into the very boards beneath us. I sat frozen, shaking uncontrollably, staring at the mark. My breath came in ragged gasps. My mind clawed for explanation, sanity, logic. Nothing fit. Nothing made sense. Then I saw it. Something small was stuck to the edge of the scratch. I leaned closer despite every instinct screaming at me to run. It was a scrap of fabric. Dark, almost black, but not from clothing. It looked old. Decayed. Like it had been buried long before I was born. My stomach twisted. The apartment was silent again. But the air still felt heavy. Watching. Waiting. And I knew, deep in my gut, that whatever I fought off tonight, wasn't finished with me. Not even close. For a long time, I didn't move. My lungs worked in shallow, stuttering breaths, but the rest of me felt carved from ice. The small scrap of decayed fabric clung to the edge of the scratch in the floor like a warning, proof that what had touched me, what had crawled across my apartment, was not some hallucination born of stress. It was real. Tangible. And it had left something behind. I tried to pick up my phone again out of instinct, but it was still dead, the screen a useless black mirror reflecting the faint tremble in my fingertips. I plugged it into the charger, willing it to wake up, to connect me to someone, anyone, who could anchor me to reality. The charging light blinked to life, and I almost cried from relief. I needed time. I needed answers. I needed distance from whatever had crawled toward me in the dark. But as the phone began to power on, the smell hit me again. That wet, rancid scent of soil and rust, stronger now, as if the creature hadn't retreated at all, just shifted. I looked toward the bedroom. The door was still open, the corner of the room swallowed in dim yellow light from the hallway bulb. For a moment, I thought I saw something move in the shadows. A twitch. A shift. A ripple along the floorboards. I blinked hard. The shape was gone. My phone buzzed violently in my hand, making me jump. Messages poured in from my friend, the one I'd spoken to before everything went dark. Are you okay? I'm calling you. Pick up. Please answer. I hit the call button. The moment her voice came through, my breath loosened in my chest. But before I could speak, her tone sharpened. You sound terrified. What happened? I swallowed hard. It was here. It touched me. I hit it and it just disappeared. My voice cracked. But it's not gone. I can feel it. Silence stretched on the line for a moment before she answered, low and steady. I'm coming over. No, I already knew that was the wrong move. Please. Don't come here. Whatever this thing is, it's attached to the apartment. Or to me. If you walk into this, I trailed off, unable to finish the thought. She exhaled shakily. Then come stay with me. Leave now. Pack a bag and just go. I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But a sickening realization twisted through my gut. I think I need to understand what it wants, I said, the words tasting like fear and inevitability. If I leave, it might follow me. Or it might get worse. You're not making sense, she whispered, but her voice trembled. You're scaring me. I almost laughed at how absurd that was. I was scared of me, too. Before I could say anything else, a noise rolled through the apartment, a deep, groaning creak from beneath the floorboards. Not like settling wood. More like something pushing upward from underneath, straining against the planks. My blood froze. What was that? She asked. I stepped backward slowly, staring at the floor. The boards under the coffee table bowed upward for a fraction of a second, then settled again. I backed away farther, unable to tear my eyes from the spot. It's under the floor, I whispered. It moved. My friend's voice rose in sheer alarm. Get out. Now. The ground shifted again, harder this time, making the lamp on the end table rattle. Something scraped beneath the planks like nails, or claws, dragging along their underside. The boards trembled as if something was testing their strength. Testing for weak spots. I hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't want her to hear what might come next. I snatched my shoes, my bag, my keys, no coat, no order to my movements, just sheer instinct to get away. I reached the door, hands shaking as I jammed the key into the lock. And then a loud, splintering crack echoed behind me. I turned just in time to see the floorboards near the bedroom doorway bulge upward, the wood stretching like skin over bone. A fissure split open, releasing a burst of cold, damp air that smelled like a grave torn open too soon. Dirt sprinkled across the floor as the crack widened. A pale hand, thin, wrong, with joints bending at unnatural angles, slid through the opening, gripping the floor with long, soil-caked fingers. Another hand followed. Then the suggestion of an arm, sinew stretched taut over fractured bone. I stumbled backward toward the exit. The thing was coming up. Crawling its way out of the dark beneath my home. Out of somewhere it had no right to be. And this time, it wasn't dragging itself. It was climbing. I don't remember opening the door. I only remember the cold blast of the hallway air on my face, the shock of brightness after the dim, suffocating light of my apartment. I stumbled backward into the corridor just as the thing inside pulled more of itself through the floorboards, its limbs unfolding with a jerky, unnatural precision, like a puppet being yanked by invisible strings. The board snapped under its weight, sending splinters flying across the room. I slammed the door shut, my chest heaving. For several seconds I simply stood there, pressed against the opposite wall, trying to make sense of what was happening. But the silence on the other side of the door was worse than any sound. If it had been scratching, if it had been growling, at least I'd know where it was. The silence meant it was thinking. Waiting. Moving without letting me hear it. I forced myself down the stairwell, nearly tripping on the bottom step. The whole building seemed too quiet, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Every apartment door was shut, every light flickering weakly, casting thin shadows across the tiled floor. I felt watched. Not by the creature alone, by the building itself. As if everything inside it was leaning in, listening. Outside, the night air felt sharp enough to peel my skin. I walked fast, then faster, practically jogging down the block. I didn't look back. I couldn't. Every instinct told me that if I saw it staring from my window, or crawling out the front door, I would break apart. I reached a busy street, breathing hard, surrounded by people and cars and lights, everything normal, everything alive. And yet the fear didn't loosen. It sank deeper, digging its hooks into me. I couldn't shake the thought that the thing had escaped that apartment more easily than I had. That maybe it wasn't tied to the building at all. I ducked into a small late-night cafe, the kind that never completely sleeps. A few customers sat scattered around, faces lit by laptop screens or dim overhead bulbs. The smell of coffee and bread should have been comforting. It barely registered. I sat in the back corner, where I could see the entrance. My hands trembled as I wrapped them around a cup of hot water I didn't remember ordering. My thoughts buzzed like trapped flies, disjointed, frantic. My phone finally regained signal. Dozens of messages came through at once. Are you safe? Please answer. I'm coming to your place if you don't respond. I dialed my friend before she could do something reckless. The moment she answered, her voice cracked. Where are you? Tell me you're not still in the apartment. I left, I said. I saw it, coming out. She inhaled sharply, as if she had been holding her breath for minutes. Okay. Listen to me. You need to come stay with me tonight. You cannot go back there. I'm at a cafe, I said. But I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if distance matters to something like that. What is it? She asked. Do you know what it wants? I closed my eyes. No. But it's been getting closer every night. My voice trembled. And tonight it didn't wait for night. There was a long pause. I'm coming to get you, she said firmly. Send me the address. I hesitated. Not because I didn't trust her, but because some twisted part of me feared dragging her into this nightmare. But I also knew I couldn't face this alone. Not anymore. I sent the location. While waiting, I sat with my back to the wall, watching the door with an intensity that made my eyes ache. Every time someone walked in, I tensed. Every time someone walked out, I half expected something to crawl under the doorway, dragging its broken limbs into the light. My friend arrived 15 minutes later, breathless and wide-eyed. When she saw me, her expression softened into something between relief and horror. You look like you've seen death, she whispered. I managed a weak smile. Maybe I have. We left together, and for a few minutes, walking beside her in the open night, I felt a kind of fragile safety. Like the creature's reach couldn't extend into this world of streetlights and moving cars and noise. But as we approached her building, a chill crawled through me, settling under my skin. The air smelled wrong. Damp. Metallic. Familiar. My friend unlocked the entrance, pushing the door open. I stepped inside. And froze. On the floor of the lobby, trailing from the tile to the elevator, was a faint smear of dirt. Wet. Dark. Fresh. My friend turned to me, confused. What's wrong? I stared at the footprint-shaped stains leading deeper into the building. Not footprints, exactly. But marks of something dragging. It had gotten there before us. It wasn't tied to my apartment at all. It was following me. The hallway felt too narrow the moment we stepped inside. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, humming like insects trapped inside glass. My friend didn't notice the trail at first, those irregular smears of dark soil leading from the building entrance toward the elevator, but I couldn't look away. They glistened slightly under the fluorescent lights as if they were still damp. Still fresh. Come on, she said gently, touching my arm. It's safe here. You're just shaken. Anyone would be. But I couldn't move. Not until she looked down and saw what I was staring at. Her fingers tightened around my sleeve as her eyes widened. Is that, she began. Yes, I whispered. But how would it know where? It followed me. My voice cracked. It's not tied to the apartment. It wants me. Her breath hitched. The hallway suddenly felt too quiet, too hollow. She glanced toward the elevator, then the stairs. We're not staying here, she said firmly. We'll go somewhere else. A hotel. Somewhere crowded, well-lit. No, I said, shaking my head quickly. It doesn't matter. It followed me across the city. It got inside your building before we even arrived. But there has to be something we can do. Her desperation mirrored mine, but hope felt like a language I no longer spoke. I forced myself to take a step backward toward the door, but the elevator chimed. It wasn't loud. Certainly not unusual. But it made both of us flinch violently. The doors slid open with a soft mechanical sigh. I fully expected the car to be empty, but something inside glinted faintly. Something small. Something dark. My friend stepped forward cautiously, peering inside. She gasped and stumbled back, covering her mouth. On the elevator floor was a long, thin scratch, fresh, running the length of the metal like something had dragged its fingernails across the steel. And in the corner, sitting in a small pile, was more dirt. Wet. Heavy. The same as in my apartment. It was here, she whispered. It was right here. I could barely feel my legs. The air around us felt charged again, thick with a presence that I couldn't see but could feel pressing against my skin. My friend grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the stairs. "We're leaving," she said. "We're not taking the elevator." The stairwell was dimmer, the lights flickering wildly as we raced down the steps. Each floor felt like a new layer of darkness we had to peel through. I kept expecting to hear it behind us, those dragging limbs, the wet scrape of bone against concrete, but the stairwell stayed silent. Too silent. We burst outside into the night air, both of us gasping. My friend fumbled with her keys as she unlocked her car, and we climbed in, locking the doors instantly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The windows fogged slightly from our breathing. Then she turned to me. "Where do we go?" "I don't know," I whispered. "I don't know what it wants, or what it is, or how to stop it." "We can't just keep running," she said, her voice shaking. "People don't disappear without someone noticing. Something like this, maybe someone has seen it before. Maybe there's something to look up." Her words triggered something in me. A memory. A moment. Something I'd ignored without realizing its importance. The very first night, the indentation on the bed. That strange, metallic smell. Then the dirt. Then the scratches. Each sign had led it closer. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. As if it was working its way towards something. Or someone. "Search the town name," I said suddenly. "Anything about disappearances. Or bodies. Or old reports." My friend unlocked her phone with trembling fingers and began typing. The screen glowed faintly, illuminating her pale face. For a few seconds, nothing. Then she swallowed hard. "Oh God." Her voice broke. "There's something." "What?" Her eyes scanned the screen again, disbelieving. "This building. The one you moved into. It used to be part of an older housing structure. They tore half of it down decades ago." I felt my heart beat slow, as if bracing itself. "Because they found a tunnel system under it," she said, voice nearly cracking. "Old. Unmapped. And they found." She stopped. "Found what?" I demanded. She looked up at me, fear hollowing her eyes. "Bodies," she whispered. "Unidentified. Buried in the tunnels." The air in the car grew colder. "Your apartment," she continued, "it sits directly over one of the sealed entrances." A numbness swept through me, cold and absolute. The creature hadn't appeared out of nowhere. It had come from below. From a place that had been sealed for decades. A place where people had been buried long before anyone living there today had taken a breath. And it had found a way out. My friend took a shaky breath. "It wasn't breaking into your apartment." I turned slowly toward her. "It was climbing up," she whispered. "Through whatever is left of those tunnels." A tremor ran through me so violently that the car shook. She leaned closer, gripping my arm. "We can leave the city. Right now. Tonight." But something inside me shifted, something subtle, electric, horrifying. Because in that moment, as she held on to me, I realized the truth. I could still smell it. Even outside. Even miles from the apartment. The scent of earth. Of old soil. Of something climbing. Something that had already chosen me. And was not about to let me go. The moment I realized the smell hadn't faded, that it clung to me like a second skin, something inside me cracked open. Not in panic, not in despair, but in a cold, steady understanding that went deeper than fear. My friend kept talking, urging me to leave, to drive somewhere far, anywhere far, but her words blurred into the background. All I could focus on was that scent. Damp soil. Metallic breath. The stench of something that had crawled out of the earth after years, maybe decades, of being buried. "It's still with us," I whispered. My friend froze, her fingers tightening around the steering wheel. "No. No, that's just your mind. You're in shock. You're imagining it." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the truth sank deeper with each breath I took. It wasn't inside the apartment anymore. It wasn't bound to any space at all. It was bound to me. My friend stared at me, searching my face for some sign she was wrong. But I couldn't hide what I felt. The cold had seeped into my bones, into the spaces between my thoughts. There was no comfort left in denial. "We can run," she said softly. "Let's just go. Please." I nodded, but it wasn't agreement. It was resignation. I knew the creature would follow. I knew it didn't need floors or walls or tunnels. Whatever it wanted, whatever I was tied to, I couldn't escape it by crossing a city or a country. Still, we drove. The car sped through the sleeping streets, past lampposts that flickered like dying candles. Every time the lights dimmed, shadows stretched across the road like reaching fingers. My friend gasped once when we passed an alleyway, claiming she saw something move in the darkness, but when she looked again, there was nothing there. The farther we drove, the heavier the air became. When we finally reached the outskirts of the city, she pulled over near an abandoned rest stop. The place was empty, silent except for the hum of the engine. She turned to me. Tell me what you're feeling. Right now. I took a shaky breath. It's close. How close? I didn't have to answer. The car suddenly creaked, metal shifting under some subtle weight. My friend's eyes widened in terror. The engine sputtered once, as if something interfered with it. Then we both heard it. A faint dragging sound. Not from outside. Not from the ground. From somewhere around the car itself. A slow, deliberate scrape along the undercarriage, as if fingers were tracing the metal. My friend's hand flew to her mouth. No. No, no, no. Don't move, I whispered. The scraping traveled toward the back of the car. Then silence. A silence so complete it felt alive. Waiting. My friend reached for the ignition, but I grabbed her wrist. If you start the engine, it'll know exactly where we're going. Her breath hitched. It already knows. She wasn't wrong. I felt the air shift. A cold seeped into the car, flowing around us like fog. The windows fogged instantly from the inside. And then, slowly, letters began to form in the condensation on the glass. Not written by a finger. More like pressed into the fog by something unseen. Let me out. My friend screamed. The writing smeared as the fog shivered, as if the air itself trembled. She fumbled with the handle, throwing her door open. Run, she cried. But I didn't move. Because the message wasn't meant for her. It was meant for me. Another line etched itself into the fog on my window. You let me in. My heart stopped. This wasn't something that had chosen me at random. It hadn't climbed toward me by accident. I had let it into my life long before it touched my ankle or scratched my floor. Every night I had ignored the loneliness. The silence. The heaviness pressing against my chest. I had made room for something in that emptiness. And it had filled it. My friend was screaming my name from outside the car, begging me to run, to get out. But I couldn't. The air around me felt thick with presence, a shadow inside the smoke of my breath. The creature wasn't clawing anymore. It didn't need to. It had reached me. I opened the car door slowly. My friend backed away, terrified. What are you doing? She whispered. I think, my voice trembled. I think this started long before tonight. And it won't stop unless I face it. No, she cried. You don't know what it is. I do, I said. It's everything I buried. Everything I ignored. Everything I let fester in the dark. The soil scent intensified. Shadows lengthened across the pavement. Behind me, something shifted, soft, deliberate. I didn't turn around. A cold hand brushed my shoulder. Not clawed. Not broken. Just cold. I closed my eyes. And whispered, I see you. The night seemed to inhale. Then. Everything went quiet. Not peaceful. Not safe. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like the end of something. Or the beginning.